Hello and welcome to this special episode of the Rainbow Roundtable. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Sheridan, lead psychologist for No Reservations and Safe Schools mental health consultant. Today we delve into a discussion filled with both gravity and hope as we reflect on recent events here in Florida surrounding the infamous Don't Say Gay bill and its significant impact on our LGBTQ+ students, educators, and families. This episode comes on the heels of a pivotal moment. A settlement reached on March 12th between the state of Florida and LGBTQ+ families, marking a critical point in our ongoing quest for inclusivity and justice. Over the past 2 years, our commitment at Safe Schools has been steadfast. We've mobilized through rallies, engaged communities, and led students in marches to the very steps of the Capitol in Tallahassee, shining a light on the discriminatory nature of this legislation and defending the rights and dignity of LGBTQ+ individuals within our educational system. Thanks to these efforts and the relentless spirit of our community, we've seen remarkable advancements. Free expression restored. Students and educators can now openly discuss and explore issues of sexual orientation and gender identity free from the shackles of censorship. Anti-bullying protection strengthened. We've enhanced the safety nets within our schools, ensuring every student learns in an environment free from harassment. Gay-straight alliances protected. These crucial support groups can now thrive, recognized for their vital role in fostering community. Classroom references clarified. The rich diversity of LGBTQ+ lives can now be woven into our educational narratives, promoting a culture of inclusivity. Non-discrimination assured. The dark cloud of discrimination that loomed under this law has been dispelled, affirming the dignity of all students and families. Extracurricular activities protected. LGBTQ+ clubs and events will continue with a pulse for life, nurturing a sense of belonging and community among our youth. In today's discussion, we will dive deep into the origins of the Don't Say Gay bill, explore the reactions from communities and lawmakers, and highlight how Safe Schools has been sounding the alarm from the very beginning. But first, I'm honored to introduce our panel of distinguished guests, each a fierce advocate and ally in the fight for equality and justice. This is Scott Galvin. He is the Executive Director of Safe Schools and the longest-serving LGBTQ+ elected official in Florida. Scott, what are your first thoughts about this historic moment on Don't Say Gay?
I was taken aback. I didn't expect that we would reach this moment for several more years. I'm a political realist, so I was looking at how districts are drawn and conservative legislators from here and there, but it didn't occur to me that there might be a court settlement that sort of brought a quicker end to some of the confusion. So I was pleasantly surprised.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott. And we have Tiffany Williams, the Director of Outreach for Safe Schools. She hosts the popular podcast, Tiffany Explains It All. Tiffany, so Don't Say Gay. Explain it all.
Oh man, that's a loaded question. I mean, when that law came into action, I think there was so much fear for not just the students that were affected by this, but also the teachers and the families that are part of this community. And being afraid of are we going back in time? Do we have to now go back, into the closet? And now that we finally, after 2 years having to go through this struggle and fighting for literally our right, we finally have a win for our LGBTQ+ community. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Absolutely. I look forward to hearing more about what you have to say.
Thank you.
And then we have Artemis Cruz, a high school student in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. Artemis, the news of the state settlement on Don't Say Gay. What was the reaction from LGBTQ+ students?
I don't think there has been a lot of a reaction because a lot of students still haven't heard or don't understand exactly what's happening. So this space discussing and informing people of the settlement is really useful for students and teachers.
Thank you, Artemis, for sharing that. And we have Kylie Summers, a teacher here in South Florida. Kylie, you're in the trenches on Don't Say Gay. What have your colleagues said in the first days after the settlement?
My name is Kyle. I use series pronouns. No worries. Happens all the time. I think we are still trying to navigate what this actually means. The settlement in 8 pages says a lot. And until districts produce guidelines, we don't actually know how any of this will be operationalized in classrooms.
Thank you, Kyle. And we have Harold Marrero, the COO of Safe Schools and a pastor. Harold, I imagine the state settlement on Don't Say Gay was exciting news at Safe Schools and for your mission of equality for students and teachers. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm just really happy that we can say gay again. And my thoughts are, that this, even though it's a big win for us and it's something that we've been looking forward to, I think that there's still a lot of confusion around it and something that we need to work more together to, dispel some of like what the language is and what actually will be allowed in schools and what won't be allowed in schools. Because now, this has to go through a process with the school system, and who knows what they're going to do. So I think the fight's not over, but this is a major win for all of us. So I'm very happy about that.
It's just the beginning.
Yes.
Thank you, Harold.
Yes.
So thanks to all of our insightful introductions. It's truly an honor to have such passionate individuals here today. So let's begin with our historical overview segment. Today, we're tracing the path of a contentious piece of legislation known as the Don't Say Gay bill, and the robust response it has ignited from the community, especially from organizations like Safe Schools. The journey began early last year, when concerns started to bubble over a bill that sought to limit discussions and education on sexual orientation and gender identity in Florida schools. Critics of the bill argue that its language was alarmingly vague, opening doors to a wide range of interpretations that could lead to censorship and a silencing of LGBTQ+ voices in educational settings. For instance, the bill barred classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity from kindergarten through grade 3, and demanded that such discussions in other grades be, quote, age appropriate. Terms left distressingly undefined, leading to confusion and fear among educators and students alike. The heart of the matter stretched beyond just the curriculum. It aimed at the very dialogue within our schools, potentially preventing discussions about LGBTQ+ characters in literature, historical figures, or even conversations about students' own family structures. Furthermore, this bill entrenched into law the mandatory notification of parents about any changes in a student's mental, emotional, or physical health services, a move that has been criticized for potentially breaching student confidentiality and safety, especially among LGBTQ+ youth. Amidst this turmoil, Safe Schools led the charge against the encroachment of these freedoms and was the first youth-serving nonprofit to organize protests and rallies even before the bill passed through the Senate Education Committee by a 6-3 vote on February 8th. From busing youth activists to Tallahassee, to lobbying against the bill, to statewide Bring the Action protests marked by the color purple, the response was swift and visible. Noteworthy, too, were the creative and powerful demonstrations, such as the aerial messages over schools, protesting at the gates of Walt Disney World, and the partnerships with influential figures and organizations to amplify their message. This timeline of resistance underscores not just a reaction to a bill, but a broader fight for respect, dignity, and safety for all students, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Yet, despite the outcry and the advocacy, on March 28th, the bill was signed into law, sending shockwaves through our communities and schools, and setting a precedent that could potentially affect the mental and emotional well-being of countless students. But the fight didn't end there. The aftermath saw an increase in Know Your Rights sessions, discussions on the real implications of the law, and the adaptation of strategies to navigate this new landscape. Safe Schools remained at the forefront, offering guidance, support, and a platform for those affected to share their stories and find solace. This overview, while brief, highlights the significant battle waged not just on legislative floors, but in the hearts and minds of our community. So I'd like to turn it over to our panelists now. How do you interpret the mobilization and reactions to the Don't Say Gay bill? And importantly, what do you believe this says about the direction of our educational system and the protection of LGBTQ+ rights?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll jump in first. When the law was first proposed a couple of years ago, our board chairperson, Tom Lander, called me, and he was stoked because he and I are from an era where we remember quite well, Anita Bryant and the anti-LGBT world that we grew up in, where people didn't say gay, didn't speak gay. I mean, I didn't even know another gay person personally until I was in college, and then it was just some random person over there. We remembered how, suffocating the world was at that time, and so I think that's part of why when he called and said we should do a rally, my little rebellious self jumped right at it and said, yeah, let's do a rally, because we were both motivated from a point of saying, no, we don't want to go backwards on all of this again.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the speed of where things develop were slow, because I don't think people really expected this to even pass. Right. I think that everyone got so used to us moving forward and making leaps in society that people just thought this was a bill with no teeth, and therefore didn't really put any thought into it. And I think that it's, like you said, Scott, coming at it from a historical perspective, a historical memory, really allowed Safe Schools to jump on it and be one of the first to sound the alarm. Because even if we would have been wrong, like we still should have spoken about how that was even allowed to be. Well, it could be allowed to do whatever, but how that even made it into the floor. Right. Why people are even thinking about that at this point in time, which is scary. And now we see 2 years later that it wasn't just that; it was a lot more stuff. And here we are today. So I think. I'm really proud of Safe Schools and how quickly we mobilized. And back then, I went to all the rallies and I took pictures and videos, and it just felt different. It felt like something was different. There was something in the air that really gave me the inspiration to be like, I want to film all this. I want to see what's happening, because I wasn't in my position back then with Safe Schools, but it just felt different. It felt like something was in the air that was only going to get worse.
Yeah, I remember sitting at an LGBTQ roundtable that was facilitated by a district department in the presence of the then superintendent. And someone from legislative affairs, when the question came up, well, what is the district's position on this? We were told, don't worry about it. Wow. This isn't going to go anywhere. And in the back of my head, having been an English teacher and having been a history teacher, the thing that popped into my mind was the period of Reconstruction. This follows a very similar pattern. So we have Obergefell in 2015. We have this period of progress. And similar to the aftermath of the American Civil War, we have a period of progress followed by a period of repression. And when I noticed the pattern, I said, oh, this is going forward. Because this is the American way, unless we as a people say no more. And to Harold's point, Don't Say Gay or 1557 came with 2 other bills, which allowed for really the undoing and the silencing of historically minoritized and marginalized people. So it's interesting to be in this place where there's now a settlement agreement that addresses part of the harm that has been done. And the question is, well, what is the path forward?
Yeah, I definitely can agree with what you said earlier about, actually technically with all of you, in the sense of like, I think at the time, again, in history, that's like the blueprint is there, but we don't really look at the blueprint because again, we're making so much progress. And at the same time, a lot of us were thinking like, this is probably not gonna pass. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is ridiculous. And like you said, like history does repeat itself. And I think now more than ever, I think people are starting to see the pattern and like you said, the American way. And we're like, this actually hasn't been working for years. Oh my gosh, we actually really need to change things. And now there are more people in community organizations that are like, we're not okay with this. And we're going to say were not like for this from the get-go. And I think there's still a lot of people that are unaware of a lot of things, or like they're unaware that some of these laws are being passed, you know? Or the other thing that you hear very commonly, it's like, well, that doesn't affect me, so I really don't, you know, it doesn't, I don't have anything to say in that. It's like, no, but like community is about a gathering of multiple different peoples. And it's like, if you have a problem, that's my problem too, because we're supposed to have each other's back. And with the Don't Say Gay bill, like, again, a lot of people were kind of like, oh, this is not going to happen. And then when it did pass, then it was like this scrambling of like, oh my gosh, what do we do now? Like, can I have a picture of my spouse on my table if I'm an educator? Or if I have a student that is, you know, confides into me and tells me their preferred pronouns or like, you know, their preferred name, and being put in a position where like the law says like, oh, now you have to like inform the parents of the situation. And that's very terrifying, because the older generation who were part of that knows what happens when those kids get, you know, basically called out or like, you know, exposed, that it's like, oh, now we have to fix you. And it's like, instead of like just accepting the child and the person for who they are.
Artemis, what was it like for you or your friends when this started to come out?
When the law was first proposed and I read a news article about it, I was like, even if it doesn't pass, it's still very scary, because it represents a shift in like the focus of America as a whole. And like now we're going against queer people. And in my school, when they were discussing this in the state legislature, there was even a school walkout organized. So there was definitely some pushback, but there was still like everything was very scary for me, like as a queer student, like living in such a like negative environment. And now even at a state legislature level, I'm getting like more pushback for like even existing and not being able to like discuss who I am in a classroom.
Yeah. And the sad part of all this is the conniving part, like the I guess the evil part of all this is the broad language that was used, the non-specific language that was used, because they knew that, or maybe not, but it just feels like they knew that teachers would then be scared that people would overreact, and because they don't know what to do, there was no clear direction. And the fact that this bill really, and all the other bills targeted such a small percentage of the LGBTQ plus community, you know, and it really targeted the trans community or the non-binary community with their preferred names and preferred pronouns, that, you know, forcing kids to use dead names, that's really aggressive from a mental health perspective. And the targeting of such a small population by, you know, and here's the thing, like, the reason behind these bills tend to always break down to some warped way of understanding religion or some form of some flavor of Christianity, that it just has no place in a pluralistic society. And for them to just push it like that, it just that was, I don't know.
That was always the power of Don't Say Gay as a law. The fear, the uncertainty that it stoked. It wasn't that the language was so damning. It was that people, like you say, didn't know what to do, were afraid to be themselves, were afraid to help somebody else. And that was very purposeful. You know, I watch legislation get drafted and passed all the time. That's where the real power of Don't Say Gay was. Its vagueness and its ability to be interpreted however you wanted it to be interpreted.
And I think that that's how it became a very slippery slope, right? So it's in its first iteration, it said you couldn't have these conversations in K-3 or in ways that were not age or developmentally appropriate.
Right.
And we were all like, well, what does age and developmentally appropriate mean?
Yeah.
So then the Florida Department of Education threw us a bone and said age and developmentally appropriate is dictated by state standards. Well, there are very few standards that address gender identity or sexual orientation outside of the context of upper level high school courses. So teachers then began to wonder, well, does my lesson on characterization, which includes a mini unit on Big 8 identity facets, does that constitute? Is this part of that? And so I think with the settlement agreement, having a little bit more clarity around what is classroom instruction versus what isn't is great. And to the point of targeting trans and non-binary folk, that work is still left to be done. This settlement agreement does not address pronouns or preferred titles. And so I'm interested in seeing what's the next step.
Yeah.